Hello and welcome to another Freelance Fridge video tutorial. I'm going to be covering a lot of details about zBrush over a few video tutorials here. And this first one I want to cover kind of the general basic elements and tools of zBrush just to get you kind of familiar with the interface. So when you first open up zBrush, you're going to have this project window come up where you can choose something to start with. And I usually start with one of these Dynameshes here. And just for the sake, it doesn't really matter which one you start with. But I would say somewhere in the range of 128 to 32. So just go ahead and click on one. Double click to open it. And now you have this first object here that you can start building something in zBrush. Now the very first thing I like to do is turn on the perspective, which is just this button here. And that kind of puts the object in more of a perspective mode as you're building and everything. So just for sake of knowing which side is which on this object so you can see things as I start moving it around, I'm just going to quickly build something on the front of here just so we know what side's the front versus the back or the sides and everything. Alright, doesn't really matter. This is more of just basics to kind of cover all the tools. Alright, so now that you have an object in the screen and you're wanting to start building, the first thing you're going to want to know is all about the mouse controls. How do you move around in this 3D space? How do you see the front, back, side, everything of your object? So the first thing you'll notice is if you click anywhere in this gray area, just with your left mouse, click and drag, you can easily kind of move around and see all sides of your object. And again, I'm just clicking and dragging for that. And then the next thing that also helps you kind of see around your object or move around is if you hold down Option or Alt on your keyboard and then click and drag, it kind of moves more of side to side or up and down rather than rotating around the object. So again, if I don't hold down Alt and move, it's more of rotating around the object. If I hold down Alt and move, it's kind of more of a side to side, up and down. So you're going to kind of use those together as you move around to kind of see what you're building. The other thing you'll want to know how to do is zoom in on your object. So the way to do that is to hold down Control on your keyboard, and then you're going to want to right click and drag, and you can zoom in and out on your object. Again, that's holding down Control and then right click and dragging. Another thing to keep in mind is if you hold down Control, you see how it turns into a yellow circle here? You can also use this tool to mask out part of your object when you're building. So instead of right clicking, I'm going to left click on the object, and you'll see it starts masking out a certain area on the object. And then what you can do is once you start using your build tools again, your brushes, it's going to build around that mask. And also, if you wanted to switch that mask, you're just going to hold down Control on your keyboard, and while you have the mask setting up, just click once off to the side, and that switches which side the mask is on. And you can still add to it or take away, and then again you can start building up that way. Sometimes this is beneficial for building a certain way, using when you just want to edit a part of your object, not the whole thing. And then you're probably wondering, well, now that I have this mask on here, how do I get rid of it when I'm done? So you're going to just click hold down Control, click and drag off in the gray area, and it gets rid of your mask. And then as you start building, you'll notice you get these weird imperfections if you distort an object too much. And that's real easy to change or edit. All you have to do is, again, hold down Control while you have the mask tool up, click and drag off to the side, and then it remeshes your object, and then you can smooth it out. Then you're asking yourself, James, well, how are you smoothing your object? Great question. All I'm doing is holding down Shift on the keyboard, and it changes to a blue circle. And while I hold down Shift, I just click and drag on my object, and I can kind of smooth it out. Again, that's just holding down Shift and then clicking and dragging, and allows you to smooth out any of the areas you want. So that's kind of the basics of moving things around. One other thing I'll let you know about is maybe you want to get an exact side view or an exact front view of your object. You're going to hold down Shift and Alt or Shift and Option at the same time, and then when you click and drag, it'll snap to the side, or it'll snap to the front, or it'll snap to the bottom. You can get an exact bottom view, exact top view, and exact side view. And again, that's holding down Shift and then hitting Alt as you're dragging, and it'll allow you to snap to one side or another. So that covers all the mouse controls. The other thing you're going to want to know is a little bit about all these brushes. You just click here to choose a different brush, and I'll show you some of my favorites. You have the standard brush here, which, as it's called, it's pretty standard. It builds up on the object, or if you hold down Alt on your keyboard, you can do the opposite of the brush. So instead of building up, it's reducing and making a concave right there. So the standard brush is pretty simple. It's kind of a good go-to brush. Then the other brush I like to use is Inflate. And this is when I want to create a larger object on a larger piece on my object. So Inflate allows you to kind of build up almost like a balloon part of your object here. So that's what I'm doing with Inflate. And again, if you get to a spot where you start seeing the faces on your object here and it's looking funky, again, just hold down Control and click and drag off to the side here, and it'll remesh your object, and then you can smooth it out to fix any imperfections. Alrighty. Then the next one I wanted to show is Magnify, which is very similar to Inflate, except it's more intense. And so it'll magnify quicker than Inflate will. And then let's see here. Another great one is Slash. This allows you to kind of carve into your object a bit. And for this one, I'll make the brush size smaller. And for brush size changing, you're just going to use the two brackets on your keyboard next to the P. So bracket up and down will make it bigger or smaller brush. And so then I can carve into my object with that Slash tool. Now if that's too intense and it's carving too deep, you can always hit Control Z on the keyboard. And then up here where it says Intensity, this is going to be up there for whatever brush you use. So you can decrease this intensity for the particular brush you're using. And then when you carve, see, it's a lot more subtle. and it doesn't go quite as deep into your object. So this is something you'll be messing with a lot, is the intensity. Alright, and then a couple other tools that are pretty useful is snake hook. This allows you to pull kind of more of a snake-like object out of your mesh. So if I make the brush size a little bigger, then I pull, undo. It'll make these snake-like protrusions from the object, and you can make them bigger or smaller based on your brush size. And then again, if the mesh is being weird, just do the control click and drag off to the side, and it'll remesh the object, and you can smooth it out as needed. Another great tool under the brushes is Move, and it does exactly what it says. It helps you move part of an object. So if you wanted to move this horn-like protrusion down, you could using the Move tool, or perhaps you wanted some whatever, I don't even know what this is. It's just turning into a mess, but you can move parts of the object outward or inward or up, down. And let's see if there's anything else from the basic tools that I use a lot of. Pinch, sometimes I can use a lot. Pinch allows you to kind of bring two parts of an object closer together, like that. So that could be real beneficial for lips or eyelids or creases and things like that, to make them a little more crisp. And then let's see here. I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Sometimes I use Flatten, and Flatten kind of smooths out an area and makes it more of a face or a surface in and of itself. So you can see it's a little more like a plane rather than a spherical part of the object. So it kind of allows you to make kind of more of a flat part on the object as needed. Alright, so that covers the basic brushes that I use. Another area I'd like to introduce you to is the Subtool tab over here. This is where all of your individual objects will show up. So as you're building, you're probably not going to want to build your entire figurine using one sphere. You want to use multiple objects for different parts of your character. So probably a few for the head, a few for the body, a few for the hands, and things like that. So over here you can click Insert, and you can insert any type of object into your scene to add to it. So I'll just put another sphere in here, and you'll see it added it on the subtool here. And to select it, I can just click on it here, or on screen if you actually see the object, if it's not hidden too much underneath the existing object, you can actually just hit Alt and click once to select different objects, and you'll see it kind of highlights it a little bit of a lighter color to let you know that that's the particular one selected. So just click, holding down Alt click, I've got that sphere selected, and then I can go ahead and edit this however I see fit. So if I were going to put another protrusion on that or whatever. But of course you don't want this new object all the way inside of your other object. You're probably going to use this for a body or a hand or something else. So you're going to want to move this. There's a couple ways that you can move things. You can use these tools up here to move, scale, and rotate things. And you just click in the middle here if you want to move it uniformly somewhere else. or if you want to rotate it, you can click and drag to kind of make a starting point, and then you can rotate it like so. But the problem with these is they're not super accurate. So if I'm going to make like a body that's directly below this weird antlered head thing, then I want to make it go directly down. So if I click back on the draw tool here, and then if I click and drag to go to another tab on here, there's one called the Deformation tab. And this I use a heck of a lot because it allows you to move things very precisely. So under offset here, I can choose X, Y, or Z as far as where the object is moved. So just to kind of remind you, let me kind of pull this object up a little bit. X, when you move X, it's going to move from side to side. That's your X axis. If you move Y, that's going to move it up and down. That's your Y axis. And if you move Z, that's going to move it forward or back. That's your Z axis. So I'm going to use Y because I want to move it down. And now it's kind of in place of where a body would be or whatnot. And then there's all sorts of different ways that you can edit the object under this Deformation tab. You can size it, scale it up and down. You can even turn off a few of these if you want to just size it based on the Z axis. You can turn off the X and the Y, and then it's only going to size it based on the Z axis. There's bend, there's skew, and inflate, balloon, spherize. You'll just have to play with these and see what works for you as far as editing your object. This rotate is pretty nice for when you want to rotate an object specifically. And there's things like mirror in here and things like that. So that basically covers that. There is one more area here that I want to introduce you to, and that's called geometry. And underneath geometry, a setting that you're probably going to use a lot is Dynamesh. And when you click on here and click the Dynamesh button, you're going to choose a resolution. You want to start kind of low, like 128 or even lower than that. And then you're going to hit Control on your keyboard and click and drag for remeshing using Dynamesh. So now Dynamesh is on this particular object. We're going to want to do the same for every object in the scene. This one, since we started with the Dynamesh object to begin with, it already has it on there. But this is a tool that's beneficial to increase the number of polys on your object. Once you start carving in a lot of specific details, you're probably going to want to increase your Dynamesh so that you don't lose detail when you start adding it. So let me show you a quick example of that and why you might want to increase Dynamesh at some point. So if I use the slash tool here, and if I carve something into this, and say it's pretty deep, if I were to just remesh it right now, it kind of messes with some of the polys in the crack here. So I can hit Control Z to undo that. But if I want to keep it from doing that, you can increase the Dynamesh a little bit at a time and then remesh it. And since it's using more polys, you have less of an issue with the inside of this object. The other thing you might be wondering is why this one object is mirroring everything that's done to it, while the other object is not. That's based on the symmetry settings on the object. These are easy to turn on and off. Usually when you start with an object, it's going to have symmetry on. That's what you see here, where one side of the object mirrors the other. When you create new objects in the scene, they tend to not have symmetry on. So if you wanted something symmetrical on this torpedo body shape, you're just going to press X on your keyboard once and let go. And then at this point, you can do things to your object that will be mirror image. So now you can see that it's doing the same thing on both sides of my object off of the X-axis. And then it's as easy as pressing X again to turn it off. And then if I were to do something else to my object, it's only going to do it one time, not mirroring it. And you can do the same thing with any object. So if I wanted to not mirror on this top area, I just press X to turn it off, and then it's not going to mirror it. It's just going to do it on one side. And again, just pressing X to turn it back on if you want it to be mirrored. That pretty much covers the basics to get started as far as building things. And again, you just want to add extra objects in your subtool whenever you want to build something additionally, and you have different types of objects to start with. So if you're making a collar for this, you might start with a cylinder. If you're making a more boxy body, you may start with a cube to begin with, and things like that. And there's some other areas that I'll be covering in other tutorials, including the light tab of how to render an object, which is related to the render properties as well. And I'll also cover Z plugin for reducing the number of polys in your object and exporting for 3D print and things like that. But I wanted to start the first tutorial just giving you some rough basics to get started. And then I'll go into more specifics about building a unique specific character in these next few tutorials.